Joining us now, award-winning reporter Chip Brown from the HornsDigest.com staff, part of the Scout.com group. He has covered Texas, the Big 12, and the sports world for more than 2 decades with the Associated Press, the Dallas Morning News. Basically, he's been all over Big 12 country. Chip, great to have you on the show. We want to talk all about BYU and if there's any potential of them going to the Big 12. But first of all, we've got to know, is Taysom Hill public enemy number 1 for the UT fan base?
I'll tell you what, everybody still talks about how the kid with the knee brace ran for 200-plus yards en route to 550 yards rushing that night. Every time I say that number, I still can't believe it. I mean, that was just about as well, I call it the pulverizing in Provo. I was there, the rain, thunder, delay, everything, and then Taysom Hill just running all over the Texas Longhorns. Never seen anything like it.
That was crazy. That's a new perspective.
The
kid with
fans.
the knee brace.
Yeah, you don't think about the guy that had a knee brace. Yeah, that's fair.
Chip Brown with us, HornsDigest.com staff member, an award-winning writer on BYU Sports Nation. Chip, you recently said on Twitter and in a number of other venues that the Big 12 has zero intention of expanding right now and particularly inviting BYU in. Why would the Big 12 not want a team like BYU with their national fan base?
Well, I'll tell you what. I mean, I think that the mindset of the Big 12, after going through the realignment, a couple of versions of it, right, since 2010, Texas led this charge, and I don't know. I know, actually, that not every other member of the Big 12 agreed, including Oklahoma. Oklahoma felt like the Big 12 should be 12, but Texas and interim commissioner at the time, Chuck Ninus, said that 10 would be ideal, and I think ultimately Mac Brown and Bob Stoops agreed that, having a 10-team league, you play everybody else, you get a true champion, round robin scheduling in basketball, it just made everybody's lives easier from an athletic director standpoint, scheduling-wise, all that, and the true champion. Now, I think immediately after that, you had Alabama and Georgia getting to the SEC championship game without playing the best teams from the other division in the SEC. Now, they had to play each other, and that was the SEC's argument that, hey, you're going to get a true champion. But the Big 12 has stuck to this 10-team philosophy since. And I think the only way that would change would be if there were some ripple effect from the attempt of the Power 5 conferences right now to get rules through the entire 330 membership in Division I that would be favorable for them. And, of course, we're talking about the stipend for student-athletes and all the stuff that should be approved in August. Now, BYU was on the list of potential expansion targets when Dan Beebe was the commissioner and leading up to the realignment of 2010. In fact, it was BYU and Air Force who were probably at the top of the list because it expanded the Big 12's geographical footprint.
Yeah.
And then it went back and forth. There was some resistance, I think, from BYU, and they were celebrating their independence and their own television deal. And I think both sides sort of agreed, hey, we're good. And then more realignment happens, and now we're headed into this phase of the really dividing the haves and the have-nots. And it's clear that, from what Bronco Mendenhall said recently, that BYU really is going to be, potentially in a scheduling bind if they can't attach themselves to one of the power conferences. So I'm told that the mindset has not changed from the Big 12, that they are going to stick with 10 until they see how this whatever world Division I is going to live in after August with the rules that are more favorable to the power conferences, they're going to see how that shakes out before any possible movement in realignment would happen.
Chip, has BYU ever been invited to the Big 12?
No, not. I mean, I think there was some conversation when the summer of 2010, when that was happening, Nebraska and ultimately Colorado left the Big 12. I think there were conversations, and I think ultimately that's all it was. And I was told at that time that BYU was reluctant as well, because remember, Oklahoma shook things up the following year and said, when A&M was looking like they were going to leave and ultimately left, Oklahoma said, we're looking at all of our conference options, and appeared to try and make a run to the Pac-12. And that was unsuccessful. And I think at that time, BYU was saying, wow, that Big 12 is really unstable. I'm not sure that that's a place we want to be. And so I think there was a mutual, okay, everybody's good. And I don't think it's ever recovered from that. And, again, Oklahoma really wanted Louisville in the Big 12. They wanted West Virginia and Louisville. And Oklahoma wanted the conference, the Big 12, to be 12. But ultimately, they were, outvoted by a group that was led by Texas and with the endorsement of then interim commissioner Chuck Ninus.
Chip Brown on BYU Sports Nation, award-winning reporter and writer at hornsdigest.com, co-host of Mornings with Chip and Chad on 104.9 FM. Okay, we want to know what BYU has to do to become undeniably attractive to the Big 12 or any Power 5 conference for that matter. From your perspective in Texas, what can BYU do to improve the brand and value?
Keep winning. I mean, no, seriously. I mean, think about it. Look at West Virginia. I mean, that Orange Bowl victory over Clemson, 70-33 or whatever it was, is essentially what got them into the Big 12 over a Louisville program that has been across the board better than West Virginia by a mile. And TCU, the success of Gary Patterson going to the Rose Bowl and beating Wisconsin, that kind of success is what it's all about. Television ratings and revenue, and that's Bronco Mendenhall's got to keep winning. And I'm not saying that there couldn't be another shift in realignment after we get through whatever the new Division I rule book is going to look like. And, of course, the ultimate threat was that the Power 5 conference would break away from the NCAA. Now, Mark Emmert says this week, and he says every time he's asked, that's not going to happen. And I don't think the commissioners of the Power 5 conferences are thinking that way at all. Right now, they're trying to build consensus for as much of that rule book change as they can get leading into August. But if there's some massive shift, and I was told that if the Power 5 broke away from the NCAA, basically forming their own conference, there could be schools that would be weeded out and schools added. Like a Boise, a Fresno, a BYU. I just don't think we're going to get to that extreme. But trying to predict what's going to happen next in the power structure of college football is, like trying to chase Mercury at times.
Yeah, good luck. Good luck with that.
Absolutely. What would it take for the Big 12 to expand?
I don't think the Big 12 would expand. Let's be honest. ESPN is driving a lot of this. ESPN has a contract with BYU. ESPN has a Tier 1 contract with the Big 12. And those conversations are going to dictate a lot of how much added value would BYU bring in terms of, do they automatically walk in and represent a full share, or do they have to, like TCU and West Virginia,
and
build
Utah.
up, and Utah build up to a full share? And that's where the Big 12 has watched the SEC and said, you know what, that piece is not out there. Now, they might have been wrong on Louisville, and who knows if they're not, being smart on BYU. But right now, they feel like the television money is good, it's competitive, and we'll see how long the other schools in the Big 12, because it is unequal revenue sharing in the Big 12. Texas makes substantially more than everyone else because of the Longhorn Network and the $15 million a year that brings in. We will never see a deal like that again. ESPN, in my mind, panicked because they saw Texas as this massive chess piece being courted by the SEC, the Big Ten, and the Pac-12 at different times, and they needed to protect their inventory, which included Texas and Oklahoma, so they gave Texas a fortune to keep them right in the Big 12 and make them basically immovable. But there's a new athletic director now, Steve Patterson. He's a wild card. He's not anywhere near as transparent as the lost odds. How long can Texas sort of control things is sort of what I'm watching before the rest of the conference says, hey, you know what, we need to expand. We need to be 12 again. So some of the power brokers are shifting, and that's another thing to watch. But I don't think anything happens until they see what the landscape looks like after August. And the Big 12 has been so passive. I mean, when it looked like the ACC might get picked apart before they somehow, and I'll give John Swofford Executive of the Year for getting that conference to sign the grant of rights, when there were some pretty important people at Florida State who were interested in exploring other options, tired of being a football power in a basketball conference. The Big 12 was not aggressive. They were going to wait and see if the ACC got picked apart basically by the Big Ten, and that if enough pieces shook loose, they would go after some of the pieces of the ACC. But because they got picked apart, I think they have been more of a, we're not going to go in and loot other conferences. We've been there, and it's not good. And so some mindset is going to have to change for the Big 12 to become more aggressive in adding.
Chip Brown has covered the Big 12 in Texas for 20-plus years, a reporter and writer at hornsdigest.com. Chip, I understand that splitting the Big 12 financial pie between 10 teams and you're playing every team with 9 conference games, all of that makes perfect sense. When it comes to money and not wanting to share, I guess logical thinking would lead me to believe that adding a championship game would kind of make that a wash. If you had 2 more teams and have a championship game, then there's still enough revenue for everybody, right?
Yeah, and here's the thing. They got paid by ESPN as if they had a conference championship game. Now, the dynamics of that is, will change as revenue. It just staggers me that television revenue continues to go up, but my gosh, it does. And the fact that the Clippers are being talked about as a purchase of $2 billion tells you
it's insane.
That they think the television revenue is going to keep going up. And why is that? Well, because it's the only thing people watch live, which means they're not TiVoing it and speeding through commercials. It's about the only thing where you watch the commercials. But at some point, even that has to have saturated, in terms of what that value is. But I'm not saying that the Big 12 is right. I mean, Texas has been able to work this thing in their favor, and they're the ones sitting on the pile of money.
Yeah.
I don't know that that Baylor and Iowa State and the schools that became known as part of the Orphan Five, Kansas State, if you pour truth serum in them, they might say, you know what, let's go grab BYU now while they're available because we don't know what's happening out there, and maybe we should be 12. But the indications I've gotten, and I'm talking to multiple schools in the Big 12, are that it's not happening now. So, again, mindsets are changing because some of the power brokers are changing, but I think everybody's going to wait and see what happens in August with the rule book for Division I before we get any more shakeup.
Chip Brown, we appreciate the time. Best luck with everything, and we look forward to what we think is a marked date on the Texas calendar now, September 6th.
Well, I know that Charlie Strong watched that film and had a few things to say to the players about how they felt about it. So I think you're right.
Hey, Chip, we appreciate the perspective. Great to have you on. We look forward to talking to you again soon.
Okay, anytime.